Today I'm going to be talking all about the AirFX rear air ride system with Instant Up, and I'm also going to show you how to do your own installation on your Softail. Before we get into the install, let's go over all the parts that you're going to need for your air ride installation. So number one, we've got the air shock. Now this is a full billet design. You'll see the air valve inlet here as well as a Schrader valve. Now this Schrader valve allows you to add pressure or release pressure. So not only does this air ride system allow you to go up and down, but it also allows you to control dampening to make a stiffer or softer ride. Next up in line is the Viair high flow air compressor system for your air suspension. Now this air compressor allows you to get twice the capacity of air and twice the pressure. Definitely a must when you're doing your air ride system. Next, we have the rear valve pairs. Now these are your solenoids. This is what allows air to move in and out of your air ride system. And I'll go over the wiring a little bit later. Now let's talk about the Instant Up air pressure switch. Now this is brand new on the market in the lineup of AirFX products. Now most of the air switches that you see stop at about 100 to 150 PSI, which is fine, but with the Softails it allows a lot more pressure in order to raise the bike. So AirFX came out with a 250 PSI air pressure switch for your system, and these are amazing. They make the bike go up a lot faster. Now let's talk about the air tank reservoir. This air tank reservoir is part of the Instant Up kit, which allows compressed air to be stored and ready to go as soon as you hit your button to get up and move. Now let's talk about the dual relay module. The dual relay module is necessary whenever you're using micro buttons on your Softail installation. These are the micro buttons made by AirFX. It's a full billet design with BB sized buttons that allow you to move your bike up and down in an instant. Just to go over one last part of your installation parts are going to be the threaded studs that are going to be coming with your air shock. Now these threaded studs will be mounted into the threaded portion of your shaft, and I'll show you how it's done in just a few minutes. Okay, so before we go any further, I wanted to show you how all the connections and air lines are going to be connected on your air ride system before we begin. So let's start with your air compressor. Now your air compressor line will be connected into the rear valve pair to this connection right here. All right. From the other side of your rear valve pair, this T will be connected in here. From the T coming up from your pressure switch will be connected into your air reservoir. From the T from the rear valve pair between them will be connected to your air shock. So this is how everything on your airline should be connected. This is a good reference for whenever you have everything installed and you're ready to connect all your airlines so that you don't make any mistakes. Next, let's talk about the wiring. So number one, on your pressure switch, you are going to have two wires. One says compressor positive, one says compressor negative. These are going to be connected to your compressor positive and your compressor negative. Next, let's wire up your dual relay module. Now this is the plug and pigtail that you're going to get. Let's plug these together. This pigtail here, the one with the threaded screw, is going to be for your micro buttons. This is going to plug in, kind of spin it to find the spot that it goes into, just like that. Once you find it, go ahead and twist it tight. Now you have a solid connection. Now we just have a few more wires to wire up, and I'm going to go over this with you. This is your rear valve pair. This is solenoid 1 and this is solenoid 2. Notice you have two wires coming from each solenoid. Now one is going to be positive and one is going to be negative. Now it doesn't matter which one you choose to be positive or which one you choose to be negative. On our pigtail we have two negatives. So we're going to connect this into here. Connect this one here. And these are our two positive leads, which will connect into here. And here. That's going to be the red and orange wire on this pigtail. Now, you have two powers and two grounds that are going to need to be connected to the battery. Now, that's going to be from your air pressure switch, your battery, and your negative, and also from your dual relay module, your positive and your negative. Now, whenever you connect these, make sure that you put an inline 25 amp fuse from your battery to the positives. Last but not least is your ignition wire. Now, I'll show you exactly where to find your ignition wire during the installation a little bit later. Now, with no further ado, let's get into this installation. So let's take the air shock. Now, this air shock, you're going to see the two shafts right here. Now, these shafts are threaded. Next, you're going to open this bag and you're going to have two all thread and 4 nuts that you're going to be using for your install. And this paper right here is the full instructions on how to install your air ride system, but we won't need these because you're watching this video right now. So, number one, let's take some of this red Loctite. And be generous with it. It's not going to hurt. We're going to come in. We're going to start threading this in. We're going to do the same with the other side. You might want to keep this upright. Let some of that Loctite drip in there. Now this is solid and stayed down. What we'll do is we'll take a paper towel and let's wipe off some of this excess red Loctite that we have here. Now that we have the air shock ready for mount, let's get our motorcycle up on the lift. We're going to support the rear end by putting a jack underneath the back. We're going to remove the rear wheel to have access to everything that we're going to need to get to on this air ride system install. Okay, so after the rear fender is removed and the rear axle is removed, it's time to remove the rear wheel to get access to install our air ride. Now that the rear wheel is removed, we're going to remove the splash guard by removing this bolt right here to have access to mount all of the electrical components to the air ride system. You can remove your original stock shock by removing this bolt and this bolt using a 3/4 inch ratchet wrench. You will also have to remove 2 more 3/4 inch nuts located here and here. Once these are removed, the original air shock will slip out this way, and you'll replace it by putting in your brand new AirFX air ride system in place using the original hardware on the back, but using the new hardware up front. Take in mind during installation that the Schrader valve should be accessible to the bottom and that the air inline should be located on the top. To begin the wiring on your installation for your Softail on your air ride system, we're going to start off with the dual relay module. But before we connect this to the battery, run any lines, we're going to make sure that we install an inline 20 amp fuse holder connected here to the battery in the event that anything grounds out or any high voltage that could cause damage to your air ride system in the future. Okay, so for mounting this component, we've already got the power line run up here, and we're going to feed the ground through here as well. Notice I've got this inline fuse holder right here with a 20 amp fuse. I've also got the ground right here. We'll connect those a little bit later, but for right now, I'm going to feed these up. Okay. So your dual relay module is going to be mounted right here. it's gonna snug up underneath this flexible rubber piece right here in this bracket. So essentially, this is where it's gonna go. Now, we're gonna be using 2 zip ties coming through this hole, coming from here to here and from here to here. That way it's secure and it's not gonna be moving around. Let's go ahead and run these zip ties through to make it a little bit easier. This isn't going anywhere. It's in a secured location. Everything's snug and tight. Okay, these are going to be our connections to our solenoids, which we'll be connecting here shortly. This right here is going to be to your switches. Now, we had already previously run the micro button switches through the handlebars whenever we did the handlebar install. And this right here, if you can see, underneath here is where we ran it to. So we'll take this and we're going to go ahead and connect it in, make sure that it's in its right position, and we'll spin tight to make sure that it's locked in place. Okay, so now we're going to be mounting the rear valve pair. Now, this rear valve pair are your solenoids that allow your air to move back and forth. Now, this is the location that we're going to be placing it in. Whenever we have a flat surface, I always like to use like a 3M double-sided Velcro Extreme. You can get this stuff from Home Depot or Lowe's. It works really well for adhesion purposes. I also use this 3M tape primer, which I'm going to be putting here. So on this side, I'm going to get some of this 3M primer and I'm going to apply it right on this plug. So I've already pre-cut this trimmed area. I've put another piece on the back side of the rear pair valve, and we're going to set this right here, apply some pressure. Okay. Now that we have the rear valve pair set up, we're going to go ahead and position it. And that will lock in place there. But this one definitely we're going to have to secure with the zip tie, which we can do now. All right. So I'm just going to run a zip tie right through here. All right, and then we're going to back door and we're going to run another zip tie right through here and make sure that it doesn't fall at any point in time. But once that's done, we will go ahead and trim the excess zip tie. Now it's time to install our Instant Up air box. Now, this is a controller for your Instant Up. This regulates the type of pressure that's coming in and out. We're going to add some 3M adhesion promoter. We'll go ahead and get a piece of this 3M Extreme Velcro and we'll mount it on the control box. And once we have our location, I'm going to apply some pressure. That way it's locked into place. Okay. So these wires right here, we can set those aside just for a few before we start connecting everything. Now, like I said, this is going to go directly into your air shock. This line here will connect into here, and this is good. And this line here will go into your air reservoir tank, and I'll show you what we've done with that. While we're here, let's go ahead and cut some air line and go ahead and connect these in. Now, these air lines have a swivel to them, which is it's pretty nice. We should be able to run one of these air lines around and connect down here, which we'll do right now. Now, first, just to let you know, anytime you're cutting these air lines, I like to use these tools. They have a straight razor on there to make a clean, straight line. And the first thing is we'll connect into here. Now we're going to make a loop, which maybe we can come through here. And we'll go ahead and cut it about right there. That's a good straight line. And Both of those are in really nice. Okay, so now let's go ahead and run the line to our air shock. So we're done there. We'll go ahead and connect this in. Connect the air line into the air shock. So we have it fed over here. I like to run all my lines, you know, with everything else, kind of consolidate them and hide them. And our air shock line is going to be right here. Okay, so now you've got a bottom shot of where our air line is coming in from. Let's see if we can zoom in. There we go. All right, there we go. All right, you need to make sure that that's pushed in all the way to make a good connection. And if you see it, we are in. That's what we want. Okay, so now it's time to install your air compressor. But before we do this, there's a couple of modifications that you're going to need to do. Number one, whenever you get your air compressor, you're going to get a check valve in here. Now, this check valve will not allow this air compressor to mount in properly where we're going to put it in. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to take this out completely, and we're going to take this air fitting and mount it right here. I've already done that on this air compressor right here. Now, the second thing that we're going to wind up doing is whenever this air compressor is mounted on, we're going to mount it with two zip ties, one here and one here, but we need a third mount, which underneath the frame, which I'm going to show you, we're going to be using some of this mounting band. I'm not sure what the stuff is called, but it has holes in it and it works great. We're going to trim a little bit of it, make a bracket that's going to go around the housing of this air compressor, and we're going to use a 1/4-20 bolt to mount this upright so that way it doesn't fall on the shock whenever it's going up and down. You know, I used some trimmers. I bent the bracket around, and what I wound up using is that 1/4-20 Allen bolt, and I put a nut on the back and tightened it up and positioned it to the location that I wanted it to be in, and it worked out really well. So now that we have this taken care of, let's go on and mount the air compressor to the motorcycle. Before we begin, I just wanted to show you the mounting locations that I was talking about that we made these brackets for. So underneath your frame, you've got a 1/4-20 hole here and a 1/4-20 hole there. We're going to be using the one furthest on the inside right here. And I'll move the camera over to show how I'm going to do this installation. And let's go ahead and mount this bolt inside here, and that's where it's going to go. So we'll go ahead and get this started. So as you can see where we mounted this air compressor, it's perfectly centered. We've got that bracket on the inside that's holding it upright, which is good, but we're going to add some heavy duty zip ties on here. And now remember earlier I had said that this line is going to go directly into the air compressor. So at this point in time, now that this is secured, we can go ahead and make this line and lengthen it out to the destination of the air compressor, which is going to be right underneath. And we will do that now. Okay, so now let's start wiring. Okay, let's start off with the air compressor wiring. You got a positive and negative from your air compressor. And from the Instant Up control pressure switch box, this is what we're going to connect first. So you got a compressor plus, compressor minus, positive and negative. Of course, we're going to connect these two together. Begin by connecting the ground in. Okay, so now let's go over powering up our solenoids, our Instant Up box, what these plugs are for. So number one, this is a plug that's coming out, and you know we're gonna have it powered here shortly. But you're gonna have our red wire, which is gonna be power. We're gonna have two grounds, and we're also going to have another power. This is going to be for our solenoids. Okay, so now we're going to take a ground from the left solenoid and connect it into the black ground wire coming off of the pigtail. We'll crimp that. Next, we're going to take the ground from the right solenoid and connect it into the secondary ground coming from the pigtail and crimp it. Next, we're going to take the left wire on the left solenoid, which is going to be a positive, and we're going to connect it into the red wire on the pigtail. The last wire is going to be the right positive wire from the right solenoid that's going to be connected into the orange wire coming from the pigtail. I understand the wiring may be a little bit difficult to see in this film, but remember, at the beginning of this video, I did show a reference on how all the wiring and all the air lines are supposed to be run. So feel free to rewind and take a look. All right, let's go ahead and start cleaning up some of these wires. I'm going to start with the easiest area, which is going to be the air compressor power wire. So we're going to start securing these power wires on the inside here. That way they're a little bit concealed. You know, that way nobody can see them. We'll take a zip tie on the bottom area. And let's put another one up top. So next, let's look into these wires right here. Now, I don't want to hide this ignition wire. I want to make sure that we have access to it whenever we need it. All right, let's tuck this back here. We're going to use these wires to hide the rest of this plug that we have here. Get you out of the way. You can fold these around, and I think one more zip tie should do it. Let's move this in. There we go. So now that this is secure, let's go ahead and trim the excess zip ties that we have that we're not going to need to be seen. We're happy with everything. This is our last airline that we're going to be connecting in. I'll show you what we're going to be doing with that air tank. It's a little trick, so check it out. Okay, so let's talk about the air tank reservoir. Anytime you have an instant up kit, you're going to have an air tank reservoir filled with air ready to go as soon as you hit your button. Unfortunately, this tank did not really fit on the Softail. We're really limited on space. Now, one location we could have put this up front is between the down tubes coming up from the front of the frame. But instead, I had a great idea of turning this highway bar into an air tank, and this is how we did it. The first thing I did was get a 1/8 copper MIP plug from the hardware store. I went ahead and drilled it out with a 10mm drill. Once I did that, I used an M10 1.5 tap. These taps are a little bit difficult to find. I was able to find it at Ace Hardware of all places, but I'm sure Amazon and a couple of other places have them as well. So once that was done, I tapped the hole, put the plug in, and put some thread sealant on there. On the other side, I did the same exact process using a 10mm drill bit as well as an M10 1.5 tap to install the 90-degree valve used for our airline coming from our instant up box. Next, we began installing the highway bar onto the motorcycle. All right, so this has been trimmed, and I'm gonna insert the air line into the fitting, making sure it snaps in place. And now we can go ahead and tighten up this highway bar, get this bike on the road. All right, so this is our ignition wire. We're gonna need to extend it. So first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna solder an extension wire on here. All right, now that we've got this soldering done, we'll get a little bit of heat shrink. Take our heat gun. Now this wire we're gonna feed upright by where the taillights connect to, where we're definitely gonna find a good ignition to use. Okay, so what I did on here is I'm using a little bit longer 1/4 20 bolt So that way, whenever it comes time to put this plate on, I have a little bit more room to do it. You should have a clean, solid install before mounting your plate. Now we can go ahead and remount our plate right here. Clipping this in, and we are solid and secure. So after I mounted everything on, I noticed that there's a little bit of pressure on the back portion right here, and this isn't clamping up all the way. The zip tie is probably going to be our best option to hold it in place. Okay, so now it's time to find the ignition accessory wire located on the rear plug to the taillights. You can tell this wire because it's going to be an orange and white wire. And what we're trying to achieve is to get power upon turning the ignition. So if you take our test light and hold it in place, we have power. Now that we know exactly what wire we're going to be tapping into, we're going to take this green wire and connect it into this orange. And white. Okay, so earlier in the video I spoke about our inline 20 amp fuse, which is going to our dual relay module. That's where this inline fuse goes to. Now, we also had another power and ground that we brought in from our instant up box. Now, this is going to be the actually this power and this ground, which is going to be going directly to the battery. So what you can do, instead of having to run another inline fuse, you can actually bring that power wire up like I did, and I actually came in, trimmed from that inline fuse, soldered and heat shrunk it in. So now I have two powers coming out, and they're both running off that same fuse, which is completely fine. Now the ground, I did run a completely separate ground, which is going to be this one right here, and I connected it onto the terminal. Okay, so now it's time to go ahead and clean up all the wiring and all the work that we've done. Okay, so now it's time to install the rear wheel.
All right, there we go.
Okay.
All right.
Let's scoot it over here a little bit. All right.
Yep.
Now.
Should start from the top to the bottom. It's okay.
Okay, let's go ahead and put that bearing in, or that spacer in.
Okay.
All right. Straighten up.
Here, yep. Okay.
You good?
Yep.
There we go.
Okay. Now check and see if we're too low or too high. Go up on the jack or go down. So it should slide right in.
Let's see. Let's go a little lower.
Okay, hold on. Yep. Okay. Now we torque. And that's it.
Okay, so now we're going to torque the rear wheel down. We're going to start with 160 foot-pounds. Once we hit 160, we're going to finalize our torque by hitting 170 foot-pounds.
All right, that's 160.
All right, that's 160 pounds.
That's it.
170 foot-pounds on the rear axle. After we torque down that rear axle, mandatory, we need to put this safety clip on. If for any reason this nut ever comes loose, this safety clip will hold this nut from coming out and causing some major damage or accidents. Now it's time to go ahead and install the rear brake caliper. These are the notches right here, and then there's another one on the opposite side. All right, there we go. I always like to hand tighten just a couple of threads first. All right. Now that those are in, we'll go ahead and torque them down. Okay, now that we've got the brake caliper installed, we're gonna go ahead and torque these down to 25 foot-pounds. That's good. And 25. Now it's time to install the rear fender. And install the seat. Now, let's test the air ride to make sure everything works. As you can see, an Air Ride suspension system for your Softail is an ultimate upgrade. Not only are you allowed to go up and down, but you also have a rebound control. And you can always top it off with micro buttons, instant up kit, as well as an electric center stand. So if you're looking to customize your Softail, go to rushbikes.com today.